Hey everybody, it looks like we've got a couple of people in the chat room, so we'll go ahead and get started. There's Rocky. So Rocky, you want to be on the video? Post on the chat. If you do, I will send you an email thing. Alberta, you want to be on the video? If so, I'll send you a Facebook thing. So anyway, let me go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the stuff that I'm doing, some of which is for the Patreon, some of which is not. So this, I'm going to show you an advanced copy of the Grand Duchy of Rheims, which is in, so that's there. And that is a component for the book that Frog God is going to do after the world setting. And it's one that that I'm working on to write. I think I'm going to be the prime author on that. And the Grand Duchy of Rheims, it's sort of an interesting thing because it starts out as a very medieval feudal sort of place in terms of the way that the other people who've worked on it have written it, and it generally appears to be a very medieval place from most of the ways that it's described in other Frog God products. And so one of the things that I did there was I looked at some of Clark Peterson's original stuff because that was in his campaign area. And one of the things that he talked about was there are some tribes that are mainly located, I'm going to have to look at my picture here, tribes mainly located up here above the Crenamar Gap. And there's a thing where they get citizenship by a lottery later on. And I looked at the whole area, and basically Rheims is an enormous plain of grass. And I was reading a book called The Empire of the Sun or Moon, which was about the Comanches. And the Comanches, out of the Native Americans of the Plains tribes, were a relatively barbaric group. They were forcing other tribes off their territories. There's a great story about Mexican forts that had been defending against the Apaches, which was back when the Apaches lived on the plains as well. And it described how there were these attacks and these attacks and these attacks. And then all of a sudden they stopped. It was like peace had suddenly broken out because all of the Apaches were on the move away past the Mexican forts, getting away out of the area. And it was like, yeah, that's because the Comanches were about to hit. And so the Comanches are actually not in any way a model for what's going into the Duchy of Rheims, but it got me thinking about the other Plains tribes that were out there, and about the Cherokee, who assimilated a lot of Western culture and sort of turned it into something that was relatively new. And then, of course, there was genocide where they were just destroyed. But that sort of culture there that takes and grafts onto things that are and ideas that are coming from outside got me thinking about the history of Rheims. Is that first it's taken by an empire called the Hyperboreans, and then it expands very, very quickly to fill again this enormous, and the thing is the hexes on this are 50-mile hexes, so this is an incredibly large area. But I sort of got thinking about this kind of sea of grass that's out there, and there had been a couple of hobgoblin invasions where they basically fell back, and that sort of made me think about Russia pulling back with the scorched earth policy. And so I've come up with this idea that there's a tribal underpinning behind the culture of Rheims. Rheims is a very, very high technology place, and sort of grafting the idea of if you had some tribes where a group of them conquered most of the rest of them. There, I was sort of going back to the Comanches. What would it look like? And so that's sort of the approach that I'm taking on the Duchy of Rheims. So that's just a kind of an update for what's going on the Frog God side of things. So in terms of the Patreon, I've been very slow for about the last 2 months, and it's partly because of working on the Duchy of Rheims. It's partly just the general work on keeping the games going. It has been I'm still working on the City Encounters book. I ran into a roadblock because we needed to have more art. There's been an awful lot of stuff going on, and so I sort of started thinking about time management. And one of the problems with the games is just that they take an enormous amount of prep time to do. They don't really have huge audiences. I mean, a lot of times about 250 people will watch one of those games, which sounds like a lot, but when you look into the amount of time that's going into putting them together and the amount of money that I've spent on them, we did our taxes last weekend. And, tax time, it's always good when you're like, hey, I found another deduction. But yeah, there were an awful lot of deductions involved in running the games. And so all of that sort of put together, I'm not saying that I won't ever run games online again, but it's got to be a definite gap hiatus here for me to get other projects put out of the way, taken care of. And so, that maybe in the future, the just because money wise we're not large enough as a Patreon. We bring in about $450 a month, which really can be entirely employed just on the publications and paying for the art and so on and so forth. It costs about it's probably about $1,200 to $1,500 to put out a module. It's probably closer to 1,200. But so the income that comes from that in terms of is easily enough to swallow up just the publishing side of that. And when you're starting to talk about going through rolls of 3D filament and so on and so forth, it just gets expensive. So hey Douglas, so that's why for the moment I'm going to back off on doing the games. That will also let me do 2 patron-only games a month. I've been only doing 1, and I think that's something that's of more interest to a lot of people. Normally, the patron games have simply been for the people who are putting more money into the Patreon. I can dip into the lower tiers a little bit if there's a second one, and substituting 1 additional game for 4 fewer is still a good trade time wise. Now, I've got the question going back to the map of what is the estimated total area of it. And so I'm going to count. I'm not going to try and do total area, but let me try and count roughly how big it is across. It's 100, 200. 1,100. Okay, so we're looking at an area from here to here is about 1,400 miles in between the tips of my fingers. So I think somebody had calculated it as being pretty much. He said it was smaller, somewhat smaller than the United States, but on pretty much the same par with that. And when you think about that as being mostly plains, people got lost on the Texas prairie. Apparently when you're in flat grassland, it's incredibly easy to get lost. And so I had these images of hobgoblins sort of moving into this area, getting lost. They have light cavalry cutting their supply chains, but never engaging with them, working to keep them away from the rivers and the water sources. And it turned into something that I think people are going to enjoy. Part of what I'm doing now is going through things that have already been written and substituting out the parts that are explicitly, or not explicitly, but they're very Western European, and substituting that with the sort of tribal stuff. Here is part of what I have been using for this, which is a naming scheme in which I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different columns here, which I take you don't necessarily in a name have to have all the columns. But for example, I've got a whole bunch of ending syllables here. This is probably every ending syllable that will show up in the book, because when you're writing a book, people are only going to come across a certain number of names. For them to get the sense of the similarity between the names, you repeat parts of them. And so I'm going to be repeating a lot of the last ones. So some of the names that we've got, and feel free to comment in the chat room. But just reading through the ones I generated, I've got Hukluothe, Hukothle, actually, Okotha, Leilon, Alon, Quojo, Quesho, Quajo, Quilyi, Noja, Vihela, Vishpa, Vukote, Shiloah, Shehilon, Tahisa, Takujeo. This one I can't even read. One of the things I always do with names is after I generate them, I often go through and simplify them, because you can end up with stuff that's completely unpronounceable at first glance, and a lot of people won't parse their way through it. It's Kejiado, which looked completely unreadable. So if that, so let me know either, in the chat room or whatever, does that sound like a culture neutral tribal sort of sound for the names that are out there in Ream? Because I'm drawing facts about the economy of plains nomads from all kinds of places, and so there's there's going to be elements that probably look or sound Mongol. There'll probably be, there's more than one plains tribe that I'm pulling a little bit from. Mainly just the economy of an open area like that, where you're able to rely on cattle, and cattle are really, really intensive agriculture. They eat a lot of grain, which is one of the reasons why in Western Europe you don't have a lot of red meat being eaten by people, for the most part, by peasants. Whereas on open plains, where you've got so much grassland to support herds, you've got the ability to pull that sort of thing in. And so the religion there is already based on a goddess of wind, Dame Torin. So I think I'm going to have to. I don't think a description's ever been written of that deity before, so I'll be writing up a couple of deities as well. Hey VA. Okay, Wonky Art says the names sound very authentic. I think you're on a great roll here. Also, just be honest, if I'm commenting too much, I never shut up. No, I tell you, people who talk in the chat room are really, really valuable, because it's fairly difficult to just make a speech out into the open air. That's one of the reasons why I like doing the interviews, because there's somebody to play off of. And I even tell people with interviews, if you're not somebody who's kind of talkative, then let's bring in a third person, to play off of. So no, I mean, go ahead and post stuff in the chat. I don't feel like I'm obligated to answer every single question if it's, something that where I've already passed by it or something like that. So the naming scheme, and then this is what my list of names looks like. And probably what I'm going to do with this list of names is that, other than simplifying them as I go, is going through the manuscript and all of the places where people have put Western European names, I'm going to substitute with these. It's also a culture that does have it was conquered by a Western European type power. It was conquered by the kingdoms of Foer. So there's a little bit of a Norman kind of conquest going on there. So I'm going to intersperse that with names that are more along the French lines. Let me see if there's anything else that I want to show from the stuff that I've been working on. On 3D Printcraft, where we did that Asian Hobgoblin Kickstarter, we just now got the funds in from that. So I need to turn on an emergency basis to getting that started to get sent out to people, because I've been really non-responsive on the Kickstarter with that. I'm thinking, okay, so here are other things I'm thinking about from my brainstorming session on the time. I am thinking that rather than working so much with with Facebook, I may start doing some things on the blog that I have and using that as a central communication focus. Um, and then and then copying that stuff to the Patreon page as well. You guys often do get advance warning about stuff that's coming out, and obviously the stuff about Ream is not something that anyone's talked about yet out there in the public. In fact, this might be the first time anyone's publicly said that the next book that we're coming out with after the world setting, there are going to be two of them. One of them is Sea King's Malice, written by Alex Kammer, which is an adventure book, but we like to have adventure books alongside something that's a geographical book, because a lot of people seem to buy one or the other. So there's that. Talking about the I was talking about how the money can get sucked up into the publications, which is where I want to direct more of it. Here is I'll go ahead and talk the economics of coming out with a module, and these vary from company to company. But right now, probably when I'm getting a cover, I'm probably paying about $300 for the cover. 2 half-page illustrations, $150 each. That's $300. Map will vary wildly, but probably it's about $100 on average. The maps really depend on what you're getting cartographers to do, because virtually every cartographer has some artistic ability, but there are some that are more, I'm doing a diagram map here for you with a little bit of art, and then you've got people like Glenn Seal and Alyssa Faden who really put together something that's very artistic looking, and so the prices vary there. So for a map, probably about $100, and then for layout, probably $100. What I need to do here is to focus on doing the writing and assigning out the rest of the work. I can do art poorly, but my art's basically like high quality amateur. So that works. My layout, high quality amateur, people can tell. I think the thing is that when you do something as a high quality amateur, one of the big differences between you and the professionals is that you spend like 5 times as much time on it as somebody who knows how to do it. And I'm really trying to keep focused on the things that I'm good at. And then, excuse me, I want to stay focused on the things that I'm good at, because as soon as I start diffusing out into other areas, it's like, really, that would have looked better if it was done by a pro. So that's another thing that I'm thinking about, and why I'm reallocating money as well as time, because it's been a long time since you guys got something that was a written resource of any kind, and I want to start getting that stuff out. We've got the draft of the Dungeon Master's Guide to Jordiba is out there. That really just needs layout, art. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hire people to do that. Unfortunately, I've got Casey Christopherson out there, who is a really phenomenal resource for finding artists and then doing the communication channel between the writer and the artist. And communicating with artists is very difficult. Anybody who's ever worked with artists probably knows this. Translating from the words to the visual, there are a lot of potential hitches that can happen there. And so I'm going to work with Casey on that. So that's actually a little bit of additional cost, because you got to pay the person who's doing the art direction as well. So let me take a look over here. The methodology with the underpinning is fascinating. Says Douglas Zielsdorf. WikiArt says, I completely agree with Doug's comment above. I think the roots of reality mixed with imagination really come off as something spectacular. Yeah, one of the tricks to this, it's very clear, I think, to readers when what you've done is grab some existing world culture and just try and wrap it up differently. Jack Vance is a master at coming up with bizarre cultures, which you actually see in more of his science fiction writing than you do in his fantasy stuff. But the exercise of coming up with, why would a culture do this, this, and this, for me, normally when I'm looking at something like that, I start with a map, and then I think about the economics. If there's a dot here for a city, well, how does that city feed itself? Who's doing that feeding? Are they happy about it? And then you just sort of throw in random questions about that. And I'm sure that a lot of people come up with stuff that's really boring by that exercise, but that happens to be the way in which I develop um, new cultures. And then part of it is little flashes of imagery, like the fact that these hobgoblins conquered the area, and then the image of tribes people retreating in front of it, but doing so because it's a trap, which I got from the book about the Comanches that I was reading. But then it pulled in the whole Russian, World War II Eastern Front scorched earth kind of thing, and I was like, yeah, this is a really huge place. So that it's flashes of little imagery that come in there. Funnily enough, a lot of the art direction, even though this really has very, very little based on the on the American frontier, the pictures that I want to get for it are described for the artists. Again, you've got to get across the idea. Two of them have titles that are straight out of the Old West. One of them is Shootout at the OK Corral. And the other one, I guess, is not titled that way, but I said I wanted to try and get this in a kind of a Frederick Remington kind of look, because Frederick Remington was the artist of the Old West. And I think that he was, I think, an impressionist. Um, I think he got a feel for wide open areas that I think is really something I want to try and pull into this book if I'm able to. Again, artists don't always, they go sideways. It's like herding cats when you're working with artists. But so we've got Jay. So Rocky says time drains away on every part that you're not professional. It really is. It's you've got to focus on what it is. Assuming that you have enough money. When I first started publishing, I published Swords and Wizardry with a $50 budget. It was I got in touch with Pete Mullen, who was the artist for it. I paid him $50, which was a discount price. Even 10 odd years ago for a full color piece of art, and that was it. I mean, I did all of the layout and everything myself, because at that point in time, we were having months when it was ramen for the last day of the month, and we're not in that situation anymore. But when you've got no resources, you do what you can with no resources. So Swords and Wizardry, yeah, is a $50 buy-in cost for getting the game started. Half hobgoblins. I don't think so. Although it would be sort of interesting. See, one of the ideas here is that there are some Deep Plains tribes that are more based on the Comanches, that they are accepted by the more civilized tribes that are out there, but they are dangerous. They are unpredictable. They just don't follow it was really interesting to read about the relationship between the Comanches and the other Plains tribes. But so yeah, I mean, maybe half hobgoblins. That's an interesting idea. James Stanton says D&D spaghetti westerns. Yeah, that it had sort of occurred to me that that's one way of scripting some of the adventure ideas in there. But the thing about Ream is that to the extent that it's cowboys and Indians, there are no cowboys. The entire culture comes from this one relatively unified tribal culture, and what you've got is you've got the people in the city who are super sophisticated, and they've got a magic college that's known throughout the world. And I wanted that to be run by this tribal culture. So there are huge differences between the people who are in the city and the people who are living out in the open plains, the nomads that are out there. But I wanted them to all be from one culture, and so that's sort of how I'm approaching the idea of having it be an interesting place for adventures. So All right, so the chat room's gone sideways a little bit, which it's always does. So anyway, so that's the story on what I'm working on with Frog God right now. Also working on the City Encounters book for 5th edition, and to expand it a little bit for Swords and Wizardry. That's a huge project because it's something like 6,000 encounters. It's a D6 and a D10. So yeah. 600 encounters. Anyway, yeah, 600 encounters, but that's still an awful lot when you're actually going in and describing them. I'm really fond of the way that I did it in the original book, which was just it was really based on City State of the Invincible Overlord, where you're just saying, you know, such and such, the butcher is walking along with his 2 pet parrots following behind him, and the goblin that looks after the parrots. And that would be like it. But it would be unusual enough that it was something that you could play off of. I think that things in the industry have moved to the point where people really expect to be given a little bit more detail in that, which I think is, in a lot of ways, for the DMs who are the super high creativity thinking at the table DMs, that's a little sad, but it's been brought home to me many times that there are all kinds of DMs out there. There was a lost my train of thought because I saw Alberta and Douglas planning to have somebody else run the games on the channel. The Yeah, I lost it entirely. You guys suck. Yeah, plans go on. So we've got Doug says, can somebody else run games on the channel? Alberta says, Doug, you offering? Doug says, perhaps. Jim Stanton comes in with perhaps a rotation of DMs and players. So, okay, the original book, it's not in print right now. I will see what I can do. I may say, I'll send, you know what? I'll send one out to the patrons. But I need to make a note to do that or I will forget. Send City Encounters to patrons. So yeah, that's actually one that's not for sale. There, long ago, there were plans that we would take it and we would dress it up, because once again, I did the cover art and the layout myself. We would dress it up for Frog God Games, and so I took it off of the Lulu site where I was selling it, and it didn't come to pass yet with Frog God. We're still working on it. But Art Braun, or Brown, I don't know how his last name is said, has done a dress up on the original book, and so I'll send that out so that people can get that. What do we got? Sorry for the train wreck, says Alberta. It's all right, Alberta. You it's just it caught my eye, and I just became more interested in reading the chat than I was about talking, which is unusual. All right, so I will send out City Encounters to all of the patrons who are in the group that are getting the actual written stuff. What else? I think that may be it. More questions, guys. Rocky rocks. Why does Rocky rock? What did he do? He's been thinking about running a game too. You know, if people are able to do Twitch, we could put together a full-scale, old-school channel and have games on different nights. So let's think about that. We're going to have to move to Twitch. I'm going to have to move to Twitch even with the interviews, because I do them through Google Hangout, which is eventually apparently going to close down, which means that instead of just clicking a button and having a Hangout open and being able to record it that way, if you want to get 2 people talking together at the same time without using Google Hangout, you need another program like XSplit or Open Broadcast. That's basically a broadcasting thing where the two people on Skype or whatever it is basically hook into this one program. You take parts of the screen and put them up on the screen that Twitch is going to be showing. So that is we'll probably have a hiatus of a couple of weeks while I'm finally figuring out how to do that. Zach helped me out with it in the original games, and then we went to Google just because it was easier for me to run the games without having to worry about something like that. So, right, Jim Stanton, Google Hangouts is going away. WikiArt, you don't need a coach to play, or you were talking about DM. You can play there. I got to tell you, the people who are patrons in this group are some of the best gamers. I mean, it's almost like we selected a cadre of super gamers on this site when I scroll through the list of people who are patrons here. Ben Barsh introduced you to Zoom last night. Take a look at it. Yeah, I've got so many programs that people want me to take a look at. I could die. I'll see what Zoom is. So when's the next patron game? I don't know. I haven't really done the schedule for this month because it's only the middle of the month right now. Zielsdorf, Jim, and Chuck. When are you guys free? I got Doug. Did I say Jim Stanton? Jim Stanton, Rocky, and Chuck. Probably one more person. All right, so we'll add one more. Tom sends his greetings from Oslo. He's also sad that Uncle Matt is hanging up his baseball cap. Yeah, I mean, I got everything from sadness to abuse from people, well-intended, friendly abuse on that. All right, so we'll get together. Let's figure on Friday. Let's say Friday. Let's say 6 Central. And let's say that since we're not doing the online games, we'll do it on an unlisted YouTube location, but we'll give the other patrons the link so that they're getting to see the other patrons playing. I think that's a cool idea, which I haven't really done, I think, in the past, because I was a little worried that some people might not want to have people watching them play. And if anybody really has a problem with that, then we can talk about it. But I think it would be fun just to be able to watch other patrons playing. Obviously, the folks that give more money to the patron, they're going to show up more often. So there will be some continuity there too. Okay, so Rocky is good. Doug is good. Chuck, Friday night, if that's weekend for you, then that's good. And then Jim Stanton. Bow out on Friday. Band is playing. Jim Stanton is a musician, by the way, and we need to get some of your videos, James, to put up for people to see. Patrons should be able to watch. Yep. Chuck's more fun with an audience. That's true of many of us. Doug says not. What not? Is that not to you get early telecon, not? Okay. So Douglas, what we'll do is we'll do one that's televised and one that's not. How about that for an idea? So Doug, that means you're not going to be in the game on Friday. You'll be in the game on the following Friday. And we'll grab Alberta for that one. And that means I've got a slot open on the one that is the TV one. Okay, so that's all of the stuff. So we'll do one that's just a private. So there's one major benefit of having the time to do 2 patron games instead of just one. You were joking. Well, you just changed around everything. I think it's still maybe a good idea though to have one of them that's not going to be televised. And also, Alberta, you're on the following, not this Friday, but the following Friday. Unless you want to be in the televised one, but there's only one space open in that one, so it means you can't bring in any of the other members of the clan to be playing in it as well, like we did last time that we opened up the computer screen and there were lots of Chuliks in the room. So, okay, good. So Jim, you're right because you weren't able to do the Friday either. So Jim, you're going to be in the second group. So we've got Doug, Alberta, and Jim in the second group. We got Rocky and Chuck in the first group. Who else is watching that wants to be in one of the games? You're a maybe for that one. Okay. If anybody else is watching who wants to be in one of the games, Chuliks do run in packs. They do. Although they're getting separated in the herd now. They've got one in Norway, one in I think San Francisco. But I understand that there are some that there are others lurking around who are not the D&D players. Okay, so Wonky Art, since I don't know, let's get you into the if you're okay with being on the one that's televised, we're going to put you in the one that's this Friday at 6. But I need to know who you are so I can get in touch with you on Facebook. So if we are if we're not Facebook friended, you need to Facebook friend me, and then send me a private message so that I know who you are on Facebook, because Facebook is usually how I coordinate getting people together on it. VA Pacific Northwest. Yeah, VA. Do you want to be in the game? I know that I know that you're not a supporter at the game level, but I try and bring some people in who are on the lower tiers from time to time. So if VA, put up if you're interested or not. We've got this Friday, and then we've got the following Friday. This Friday is going to be the televised one. The following Friday is not going to be televised. And then same thing that I said with Wonky Art is that you, since I can't tell your name from your internet handle, you'll have to friend me on Facebook and then PM me so that we can get I usually do it on a messenger where I just put everybody into the message group and then say, okay, so here's what we're doing. And then, okay, so I'm VA. If you don't say anything, I'm going to assume that you're not in. So we're almost full on that. We've got Rocky, Chuck, and Wonky Art in the first one. We got Doug, Alberta, and possibly Jim Stanton in the second one. And then we will go and grab the other people. I think we've got some people in the. That may be it for the top tier. Okay, so VA, you're going to confirm your schedule. Keelan Halverson, I will message you about it. Sorry for putting my way in, but this scene has interested me since. No, I mean that's awesome. I mean it's the OSR stuff is great stuff. It's very direct. You're in the action kind of role playing. So band schedule says that Jim is out, busy season. Okay, so not on the following Friday either. Well, what about Melody? We'll wait for the answer on that. Does she always go out? She's got to be tired of going and watching you every single performance, right? We'll see what Jim says back. When we've got married couples where one is the patron, if they're both gamers, then they're both invited to play. So Alberta, you and Peter as well on that one. And if you do commission art and miniatures, Wonky Art, I will share out some of your stuff too, because I'm thinking that on the blog more and more, I'm just thinking about the fact that I'm going to, when people have something, even if I'm thinking about how to let people know what's out there without actually endorsing it, because I haven't read a lot of the stuff that I still want to talk to people about. So I'm really good with the idea of sharing out, pictures that you've done, things like that. Okay, so Jim, if you would invite Melody, ask her if she wants to be, on the following Friday game, and that way there's more time to get her in if she wants to, and find out whether she wants to. Yeah, +4 adamantine sword for your fighter. I don't think so. All right, so I think I covered everything that I really wanted to cover. Gave you guys the sort of background information on what's happening with this Grand Duchy of Rheims book. Unfortunately, the map doesn't. Most of the stuff on here that is secret, I mean, I added my road of horses here. This is what happens. See, this is a cutout piece. The map of the world is an enormous JPEG file. And and so what I did was I put it in Photoshop and just cut out this area, and then I'm writing on it because we're doing a great big poster map for the world map, multiple poster maps that will sort of fit together, except if you really wanted to actually make them interlock, you'd have to cut off the white area around it. But so cut this out, and then you just draw on it for the cartographer. And so we've got Road of Horses. There's also a fair amount of secret stuff on here that you probably can't see because it's written in pencil. And so I don't think it's coming across through the screen, the penciling that's on there. So anyway, that's it, I guess, for covering what it is I've been working on, why it is that we're going on hiatus with the games. Yes, if we put together a bunch of OSR games, I will see to it that I already have an Uncle Matt D&D channel on Twitch, because earlier on we were broadcasting to both, one on YouTube and one on Twitch. So we have a channel. We'll just fill it with games. I think that would be a lot of fun. So all right, I think that's it for everybody, and we will talk next time. So everybody stay good, imagine the hell out of it, all of that good stuff. Take care.